Welcome to Humanly Possible, a vlog and podcast series focused on the game-changing potential of creating human-centric workplaces. I'm excited to introduce my guest, Janelle King, industrial organizational psychologist and the founder of Excel Leadership. Janelle works with organizations to build purpose-driven cultures and with individuals to build purpose-driven lives that connect to life and work. We explore the concept of workplace spirituality, which is aimed at bridging individual purpose, belonging, and community within the workplace. All right, Janelle, welcome to Humanly Possible. It's so great to have you finally. I know you recently gave birth to your baby boy, and we finally got a chance to do this, so I'm thrilled.
Yes, no, I'm excited to get out the house. But also to get into our conversation today. I think it's going to be very timely for, the scape we're in with work and everything and the future of work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Janelle, you and I connected because we're kind of kindred spirits in a lot of ways, not just professionally, because we both have an industrial organizational psychology background, but I think just, really the alignment that you have with your message and your company that focuses on workplace spirituality and purpose, which I know you'll talk more about, but this season I mentioned this to you in our pre-call, is this season is really focused on the holistic and the whole human. So I'm really excited to have the audience learn from you. So why don't you give the audience a intro about you professionally, but also what makes you human?
Yeah, for sure. So again, my name is Janelle, and for the last 5 years, I served as a life and leadership coach, and most recently pivoted into industrial organizational psychology. And I have a consultancy called Excel Leadership, where we really help organizations and teams and professionals engage and excel in meaningful work and just creating purpose-driven cultures. And so in doing that, we do that through culture, organizational culture development, but also just employee engagement and really just experience and really making sure that we're creating cultures where employees can thrive in their purpose and explore what that meaningful work looks like for them. And so super excited for that. And as far as what makes me human, really my imperfection is what makes me human. And being an Enneagram 1, learning how to really embrace that and being vulnerable in that, I would say that definitely makes me human for sure. And then as well, purpose for my message.
Awesome. Well, yeah, in imperfections, we all have them. So, I love that. I love that you're able to be vulnerable there and let us know. And I think that has a lot to do with purpose discovery, which I know you talk a lot about. And so tell us a little bit more about your background as a life coach and how that kind of connects to this world of work and bringing the whole human to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was serving as a life and leadership coach, and I still do coaching as well. But a lot of that was purpose discovery with women and helping them to uncover their purpose so they know how to channel that purpose in life and work. And so what originally mainly started out as life coaching, as we dived deeper into essentially what makes them human, what makes them tick, the passions and the purpose that was placed inside of these women, there was always like a disconnect between what they felt like they were called to do, but the role that they were operating in and they were working in. And so a lot of that looked like, okay, what is your purpose and how can we apply it to life and work? But the issue that I saw was that, these women were finding their purpose. They were getting excited about what they were called to do. They were finally seeing how all their gifts, their strengths, their talents and passions aligned. But then they would go to the workplace and feel like they weren't being seen and that they weren't being utilized in terms of their giftings and their passions. And so started to think about, okay, what does it look like to explore where this gap is between having this calling and being so compelled to it, but then going back to a workplace where you just feel like, you're disengaged, you're not being utilized, and you're not able to operate in that calling. And so lately I've been exploring what it looks like to bridge that gap between purpose and work. And the findings have been pretty staggering, but very also inspiring too, in terms of really calling leaders into accountability and really exploring what that looks like in terms of cultivating a purpose-driven culture at work.
Yeah, I love the term you use, operating in your, in your calling, right? Actually having that calling and that purpose clearly defined, and then going to a job where you're not operating in that capacity. That's got to be cognitive dissonance and energy sucking
Absolutely.
too. And I think a lot of people feel that now, especially when it comes to um, COVID and the pandemic and the social injustice, all of the world events that are happening now. You and I were talking earlier about this, but I feel like the gap is narrowing around the emotional energy that people are willing to put into jobs that just aren't filling their cup or aren't connecting to their purpose, because our emotional energy is being drained in other places. So what are your thoughts on that? How have some of the world and the country's events really impacted that journey for people?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think with COVID, it really just kind of peeled back the layer of what we already kind of knew to be true, but just purpose was never prioritized in the workplace. And I think now with COVID and just everything that's going on, it's calling people up and calling people out to really focus on what matters and how to live in alignment with what matters. People have always craved a sense of purpose. I know Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel have done a landmark study where they talked about how really we have this human inclination to search and attach meaning to life. And I always think about it, especially now that I have a newborn baby. But you could just think about kids. Kids are always asking why. They're searching for that meaning, searching for that connection. And now, with the world that we're in right now, it's even more so important as the layoffs are happening, as work is changing, people are pivoting right now. And so not just doing what has been expected in a traditional sense, but really figuring out, okay, like what matters most to me and how can I incorporate that meaning and purpose into the work that I do. I think that's going to be more important now moving forward, especially as we navigate the future landscape for work, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to your point, it's unearthing things that have already been there, but things have accelerated, I think, to the point of there's not a lot of room anymore. There's not a lot of room to
Yeah.
really mull over and spend 5-10 years in a job where the purpose just isn't connected. So let's start with the individual, because I know there's a lot of layers to this. So you've got the individual, and then you've got collective individuals in an organization. And so starting with the individual, what is the process of unearthing that purpose? And if someone is going, listening to this and going through that discovery phase, what are a few things that really should be at top of mind and taking up brain space right now?
Yeah, no, that's good. I always like to say, and I think it's funny because a lot of people say I have to find my purpose as if it's lost. And 9 times out of 10, we've always been operating in purpose, but just without an awareness. And so really just peeling back the layers of essentially who you are holistically as an individual to uncover what that purpose is. So I always like to start looking at essentially how you're designed. So really saying, who am I? And that's going to be looking at like your gifts, your talents, your strengths, your capabilities, basically everything that makes you uniquely you. I feel like sometimes, at least I've seen with my clients and honestly within myself too, we're so used to operating in our own MO that we think that, it comes naturally or easy to everyone else. But sometimes it doesn't. And that's because we're graced for that. We've been equipped and designed with that in mind. And if you've been created with a purpose, right? And so starting with the raw materials of what you've been created with. So looking at that personality type. Oftentimes when I'm working with a client, we'll look at things like the color insights, DISC profiles, MBTI, Enneagram. All those are really good starting points to use, but not just taking those assessments and saying, hey, like, oh, this is what my personality type is, but really taking that and utilize it and crafting the job roles around that. And so starting with the design, and then also next, asking yourself, okay, what am I interested in? Because your passions often point to your purpose. I always say that your passions are one of the vehicles for which you channel your purpose. And so looking into what you are interested in, and sometimes I think we also overthink it too, because we're also multi-passionate people, and sometimes we don't see how all those passions tie to our purpose. But I say our purpose is that thread that is tying those together. And a good way to really identify what that is to simply just look at your Google history or your Pinterest history, YouTube history. Oftentimes I find that the things that we're constantly researching or obsessing over are the things that we're passionate about. Or to be honest, the things that kind of like piss you off in a sense, or like
the opposite,
light you up.
right?
Yeah, especially with what's going on right now. If social injustice is something that is important to you right now, if you're wanting to really promote that message of inclusion, like, why is that? What has there been an experience where you've experienced that before, and that in return makes you want to make sure that nobody else experiences that? That can be a sense of purpose. Oftentimes our experiences lead to our purpose, which leads me to my next point: is how has your experience prepared you? And that can be experience that doesn't just even apply to job experience, although you'll want to take that into consideration as well. But life experiences, whether good or bad, or just like little things that you might not be aware of. I remember a couple years ago, I was preparing for my first keynote, and I was terrified because I hate all things public speaking, but I feel like I've always been pulled into that some way, somehow. And that was starting from junior high, where either it was a school teacher or my parents making me do these poetry competitions, being in leadership development programs in the county where I was assigned to speak to the parents and the kids over that the county, being about valedictorian in high school where I had to give valedictorian speech, all these positions where I was forced to speak publicly. I didn't see that back in time as preparation, but I remember calling my father, and I was so freaked out because there was a lot of people. I think there were 300 people, and I'm like, oh no, like I can't do this. And he was like, you know, you do realize that you've spoken to that many people before, if not more. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been prepared for this. And I think sometimes we discount those small things because we don't necessarily see or have the big picture in mind. And that's why it's also important when you are on this purpose discovery process is to enlist other people in it. I call them purpose partners that will help you to really identify what your purpose is, but also walk out that purpose with you and hold you accountable along the way, and just be your cheerleader and cheer you on in that. But oftentimes other people can see in us what we can't see in ourselves. And so having other people that can be able to support us in that discovery journey is going to be key. And then next, really just identifying your area of impact with that. So once you understand how your gifts and talents are, once you understand how you're wired, once you know what your passions are and your interests are, and you really identify and understand how you've been prepared, you can really start to piece together, okay, what is the impact that I want to make knowing these things now? A question I like to ask my clients is, how is someone's life made better because they came into contact with you? What are you leaving them? What is the imprint that you're leaving on your life? Or what is the one message that you wish that you could impart to them? That's your impact. And so seeing where your design, your passions, your experience, and impact integrate in the middle is purpose. And then once you know that, it's all about, okay, now I discovered this. Now it's all about activating it and living it out. And that's where calling comes into play. I always say that the two are different. The purpose is the reason, and then the calling is how it's being channeled. And that can be channeled into life, work, the different roles and things that we have in life. And that kind of releases the pressure to know that, you know, you may not just be called to one thing. You can be called to various things and still operate in purpose in your role in the different seasons of life and work too.
I love that. And I really think it's about like you said, leading with purpose, and your calling is the how you're operationalizing it, right? You're saying you're kind of
Absolutely.
checking yourself to say, all right, I've been called to do that, but is that my calling? That's the other thing. You might be called on something, but it may not be aligned with your purpose. And so having your purpose allows you to say, that's not where I'm going to spend my energy, because I could do that, but I'm not going to, because it does not align with this strong North Star that I've developed for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important to consider too, because I think sometimes people feel hindered because of the role that they're in. And maybe there's a responsibility there where you just can't leave just yet, but really understanding what that purpose is will allow you to craft the role into what could be a calling until it is time for that perfect alignment. Or you consider something else. There's still opportunity there to really shape the job, or to consider other ways where you can compensate for not necessarily being able to operate in that calling, in that role.
Yeah, and so that's a great segue into kind of, we've talked about the purpose, the discovery, the individual. And so if you think about the workplace, traditionally, the workplace has been I would, in the worst of cases, kind of a forceful way to impose the purpose of the company onto the person. And, I think when we talk about the future of work, and we especially talk about this new generation, this Gen Z coming into play, who are very purpose driven, very aware of social and community challenges and how the workplace plays into that. Based on my research, based on what I know, I like to say that the gap is also narrowing here on organizations to be able to create purpose-filled cultures, which you talk about a lot. And so really it's about making sure you're matching and you're bringing in people who are bringing that shared sense of vision and purpose and values, and also being open to changing and evolving that culture as you go on and you acquire more talent. So talk about, we talked about the individual, now talk about the collective organization and the culture piece, and how organizations can shape that, along with providing a destination for people to fulfill and operationalize and operate within their purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this area of research within the IO world called workplace spirituality. And it's nothing woo-woo, but essentially it is an employee sense of purpose, fulfillment, community, and spiritual ascendance within the workplace. And so there's 3 dimensions of that. And so the one dimension is personal spirituality, which is where the employee brings the sense of purpose and fulfillment into the workplace. But on the other hand of that is the organizational sense of purpose as well. And I believe that organizations don't always understand their own purpose, and then the employee doesn't understand their purpose. And so there's this dual dissonance, as you mentioned before, where the employee is disconnected to their personal purpose, the organization is disconnected to their purpose, and therefore there's no shared purpose. And so there's nothing that is motivating someone to come to work. There's nothing that is pushing someone to move forward, because there's no purpose behind what they're working towards. Or on the other hand, you have that forced purpose, where an organization does know their purpose, but the employee is not connected to that purpose. And therefore, it's just a cycle of disconnectedness, disengagement, and leads to disenfranchisement and turnover, right? And so really understanding that cultural piece is going to be really pertinent moving forward in the world of work. I mean, the research is there. When an employee understands what their purpose is and has that sense, they experience more meaning in their work, well-being, just greater job satisfaction and everything. And I think we can see that right now.
Yeah, 100%. And the one thing that I thought about too was the worst case, you've got kind of spectrums on this, a spectrum, I should say. The worst case scenario is when the individual is unaware of their purpose or isn't living into it. And then you also have an organization who isn't living into their purpose, or, they're saying one thing, doing another thing, that happens. And so that's like one side of the spectrum. And then the other side of the spectrum is when both are living into their purpose, the organization and the individuals. They're aware, they understand the calling on both sides, and the calling is the same calling. And I think we operate today a lot of in the in-between. You've got, it's kind of like that bell curve. You've got few people who are really doing this well and are really intentional. And that's why when you talk about culture, when I talk to leaders, I'm always telling them, okay, how are you going to do culture? Tell me your plan, right? And not a lot of people understand how to do it. And it's all about, it starts with your values. It starts with your mission, vision, values, and your purpose. Always that organizational development. And then you've got to get people on board. So you've got to get people who are bringing that shared sense of purpose, who are going to live into your values as an organization, and they're going to love doing it because it's their own values too. And so that dissonance is eliminated. But what happens is, startups, they grow quickly and they just hire technical experts and people who can do the job, and they just want to get people on board. And then you've got ego and drama and all the other things that happen when you're on the side of the spectrum where those things are disconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, it boils down to person organization fit and person environment fit at the end of the day, and not being so focused on the doing that we don't look into the people who do the doing and really understanding how to really create that space where people do feel like they can come, they feel like they're being recognized because their purpose is being utilized, but we're also creating that place of belonging as well, and community too.
Absolutely. Well, this was, I thank you so much for joining, because again, this season is a little bit different. We're kind of getting back to basics around the human in the workplace and not the human taking the workplace with them. And so this is, one of many different series where we're going to be talking about the different elements of the human and how that impacts the workplace. And so I want to thank you for adding your perspective and your insight and your expertise. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with, just when it comes to workplace spirituality, purpose discovery on an individual basis? Anything to tie a bow on it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I think, like I said, that this is a perfect time to be having these conversations just about realizing the holistic human and how to bring that to the workplace. I think oftentimes we think that the goals are over here, passions are over here, strategy is over here, but they're all integrated. And I think that by understanding how to create that culture of purpose will not just inform the profit, obviously, but really understand how all these things can come together. Our strategy, our processes, our workflows can be aligned with purpose, and therefore being able to operate more efficiently and productively and perform well too. Really, it's about creating a culture where everybody can win in life and in work, and not the other. That integration is going to be key moving forward. And I think companies will really see an impact when they lead with purpose and people in mind.
Perfect bow. Love it. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Janelle, so much. We hope to have you back on soon. I'm sure there's, as you progress with your research around workplace spirituality, there's going to be a lot to share. And post-COVID, I think we're going to be stepping into a whole nother, element and learning opportunities. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.